What started out as a promising modern version of the classic log flume turned into one of the largest failed rides in Cedar Point and Intamin history. The $10.5 million investment would end up closing forever just 5 years after it opened, in part due to a dramatic accident in 2013. The failure of this ride as well as that accident would be the final straw for Cedar Fair, who would end up never working with Intamin again. This is the story of Shoot the Rapids.
Been fighting wild rivers my whole life. Had some hair-raising adventures too, but none compared to the likes of Shoot the Rapids. The new canyon carver at Cedar Point.
With 2 huge drops and 2,100 feet of raging rapids, it's a thrilling wild river adventure. New at Cedar Point, Shoot the Rapids.
Intamin's relationship with Cedar Fair can be traced back to 1979 when they supplied Cedar Point with the coaster Junior Gemini, now known as Wilderness Run. This would be Intamin's first roller coaster, and unlike all of their later rides they would supply, this ride was extremely simple. Intamin would continue to supply rides for Cedar Fair throughout the 1980s and 90s. However, in the early 2000s, it's safe to say that their relationship peaked, with Intamin supplying Millennium Force at Cedar Point. This ride was not without its problems, such as the ride having to have many of its supports modified due to them not passing clearance. However, these problems were more than outweighed by the ride's popularity, with Millennium Force becoming one of the most iconic roller coasters ever built. So when Cedar Fair needed a new fill-in coaster at Cedar Point, they once again turned to Intamin, who would build Wicked Twister in 2002. Simultaneously, one of Cedar Fair's other parks, Knott's Berry Farm, was in the market for a new high-thrill coaster. So Cedar Fair bought the prototype coaster Accelerator, a Intamin hydraulic launch coaster. While both coasters would have a significant number of problems, Cedar Fair pushed on, and in 2003, they would purchase what former Cedar Fair CEO Dick Kinzel would later describe as his, quote, dumbest decision, end quote, top thrill dragster. While a hit with the public, Dragster is a mechanical nightmare, being far too complex and featuring many of the same design flaws other Intamin coasters of the time possessed, just on a much larger scale. To this day, Dragster is the most expensive ride in the park to maintain and operate. The problems with Top Thrill Dragster as well as Cedar Fair focusing on expanding their brand meant that no new Intamin rides were bought by Cedar Fair until 2007, with the addition of Maverick at Cedar Point. Maverick was yet again another problematic Intamin ride. However, its popularity once again saved it, and Cedar Fair would look again to Intamin in 2010. Only this time they would receive 2 of the most problematic rides in the world. And they would end up being the 2 final rides Cedar Fair would ever buy from Intamin. King's Dominion would get the Intamin Giga Coaster Intimidator 305, a ride that would become one of the largest financial flops for Cedar Fair, as the ride was seen as too intense by the average park guest, and actually had to have its first turn completely rebuilt and reprofiled after its first season due to its intensity. Combine this with structural issues and the normal complement of Intamin over complexity, and you get a huge financial failure of a ride. But Intimidator's failure would turn out to be the least of Cedar Fair's problems. That year, Cedar Point would add Shoot the Rapids. All of the problematic Intamin rides added by the chain up to 2010 had at least one positive thing going for them. The public liked them. The same could not be said for Shoot the Rapids. On September 3, 2009, then Cedar Point Vice President John Hildenbrandt announced that Cedar Point would be adding the Intamin modern take on a log flume in 2010. Named Shoot the Rapids, the ride would feature 2 drops, with the first and tallest drop being 85 feet or 26 meters in height, and the second and smaller drop being 49 feet or 15 meters tall. The 85-foot tall first hill would make Shoot the Rapids one of the tallest water rides in the world when it opened. Both drops had a maximum angle of just 45 degrees. The ride would be lightly themed to an illegal Western moonshine business. Interestingly, the ride was originally designed to have a height requirement of just 42 inches. The height requirement would later be raised to 46 inches when accompanied by an adult, and 48 inches to ride alone before the ride opened. Construction of the ride began over the off-season, and by spring 2010, the ride was complete, with a planned opening date of May 15, 2010. This opening date would be missed due to multiple technical problems with the ride, including the boats being too large for the trough and the boats being unbalanced when fully loaded. The ride eventually opened on June 26, 2010, more than a month late. The overall opinion of the ride was mixed at best, with it being too intimidating due to its size and theme for many younger guests and many older guests complaining about how boring the ride was. The ride was also unable to meet its advertised capacity due to the park not being able to load full boats due to the need to balance the boats. The boats had to be balanced front to back and left to right to ensure that they engaged properly with the two lift hills and that they moved properly through the trough. Originally, this meant that the back row was closed. However, this soon changed to having row 3 permanently closed. It's commonly believed that the ride had no form of upstop to prevent the boats from falling off the lift. This is not true. As you can see in this photo, there was a T-shaped bar that ran the length of the tracked portions of the ride. Once the boat engaged the lift, a mechanism under the boat would engage this bar. Just past the base of the lift, the T-shaped bar got wider, essentially locking the boat onto it. This, in conjunction with a standard anti-rollback device similar to what's on most roller coasters, should have prevented the boats from disengaging the lifts. This will become important later. The ride operated throughout the summer season, closing on Labor Day 2010. It would continue to operate on this schedule for 2011 and 2012. By the ride's third season in 2013, the ride was already seen as a failure, with ridership numbers much lower than hoped and most guests forgetting it even existed. This was not helped by the much more exciting and reliable new coaster Gatekeeper made by Bolliger and Mabillard opening in the front of the park, giving guests another reason to forget Shoot the Rapids in the back. But it would not be long before Shoot the Rapids was back in the news, except this time it was for all the wrong reasons. On Friday, July 19th, 2013, around 6:40 p.m., a boat loaded with 7 passengers was dispatched from the station. It proceeded as normal to the ride's first lift. When the boat reached the first lift hill and engaged with the lift chain, a loud crack could be heard. This sound was the lift chain snapping, a relatively simple problem that on any other ride would have led to the ride stopping in place and the riders being evacuated safely from the base of the lift. But as the Shoot the Rapids boat had not yet reached the lock point on the T-shaped upstop bar, there was nothing other than gravity holding the boat to the track. Accordingly, when the chain snapped, the boat was moved out of alignment with the anti-rollback trough and began to fall backwards down the lift hill. As it reached the bottom of the lift hill, it hit this rubber feeder wheel still turning forwards towards the lift. This, combined with the boat hitting the water back end first, caused the boat to either partially or entirely flip over, at least partially submerging some of its riders. By this point, the ride operators had e-stopped the ride. However, unlike many other Intamin water rides, this only cut power to the ride and did not drain water from the troughs. As soon as the ride operators realized what had occurred, many had jumped into the ride area to attempt to flip the boat back upright. They were joined by several park guests, and eventually, with the help of about 10 people, they were able to flip the boat either partially or completely upright. It's interesting to note that the only way the restraints could be released was by the use of a battery pack or extremely hard to access screw. This was the same system used on Intamin's roller coasters. All 7 guests on the ride were transported to the park's first aid facilities. All but 1 were released from park first aid. 1 guest was transported to the Firelands Regional Medical Center for further treatment. No guests sustained any long-term injuries. Shoot the Rapids was closed indefinitely following the incident. In late July and August 2013, park maintenance and Intamin staff could be seen working on Shoot the Rapids lift hills. However, Shoot the Rapids would not be open again in 2013. In 2014, the ride reopened with some modifications. These included the addition of a proximity sensor at the start of the locking bar that ensured the boats were always being guided by the bar, and if they were not, the ride would automatically stop, as well as a change to the ride's control system so that it was unable to have multiple boats on a lift at once. These modifications made the 2013 accident impossible on the post-2014 Shoot the Rapids. However, the popularity of the ride remained low. You may be asking yourself why they did not just lower the locking point on the upstop bar. The reason for this was because the boats were so long, it would have been impossible for the boats to navigate the curved upward slope at the base of the lift if this was done. On September 7, 2015, the ride closed for what would be the final time. That winter, rumors started circulating that Cedar Point would be removing Shoot the Rapids. These rumors would be confirmed on February 20th, 2016 at the park's annual Winter Chill Out off-season tour. Cedar Point officially stated the ride would be removed due to low ridership. By the time Cedar Point opened for the 2016 season, only sections of the ride's concrete trough, station building, and a few theming elements remained. In 2017, Professor Dilbert's Frontier Fling, a relocated sky coaster from elsewhere in the park, would occupy the land once used by Shoot the Rapids. Today, the station of Shoot the Rapids remains. In fact, if you've ever visited Forbidden Frontier on Adventure Island, you've actually walked through the former station. Many of the theming elements for Shoot the Rapids, such as the ride's rockwork and water jets, were also reused as theming for Forbidden Frontier. And finally, if you look close enough, you can still see some of the concrete trough from what was once part of the most expensive water ride in Cedar Point history. Shoot the Rapids would be the final nail in the coffin for Cedar Fair's relationship with Intamin. One final, really poor quality ride in a string of low quality rides built by Intamin. For the foreseeable future, Cedar Fair will not work with Intamin again. Cedar Point continues to be one of the safest parks on the planet, and their response to this accident both on the scene and afterwards was admirable. Intamin, however, continues to be a problematic company, with many other parks that have worked with them publicly regretting it later, such as Energylandia in Poland, who in the mid-2010s installed multiple massive Intamin rides and has now publicly stated that they are having trouble with them due to their unreliability and overpriced spare parts. Speaking of Energylandia, they have a ride that may seem familiar to Shoot the Rapids. Named Speed, this is an Intamin water coaster, essentially the evolved version of the original Shoot the Rapids concept. You will notice with Speed and all other Intamin water rides like it that they do not have lift hills, instead opting for an elevator lift. This eliminates the design flaw found on Shoot the Rapids. Today, Intamin rides continue to operate, and it seems that while they may still be unreliable, they at least seem to be safe. With more reliable rides becoming more preferred by Western parks and reliable manufacturers like Bolliger & Mabillard and Mack Rides making huge advances in the amusement industry recently, the future of Intamin, specifically in the West, remains uncertain. If you are confused about any of the ride-related topics I mentioned in this video, such as the anti-rollback system or the difference between an unreliable ride and an unsafe one, please check out the card in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, as I have made videos explaining them. I hope you enjoyed this slightly different format of what really happened, and if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to ask them in the comments section below, and I will try my best to respond. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.